Welcome back to Smile and Scars, the channel where true stories of legendary figures, jaw-dropping encounters, and heroic feats come alive. Today's story is about a fateful clash between an arrogant UFC champion and none other than Steven Seagal, a martial arts legend whose reputation precedes him. This story will take you inside a fight that started as a challenge and ended with a lesson no one could forget. It all began in Los Angeles at a high-profile martial arts convention. The UFC champion, known for his overconfidence and flashy persona, had been dominating his division and gaining international fame. He was young, fit, and cocky, often boasting about his undefeated record. At this particular event, he caught sight of Steven Seagal, surrounded by admirers, quietly observing the exhibition fights. To the champion, it seemed like a golden opportunity to prove that modern MMA could easily surpass old-school martial arts legends. With a smug grin, the champion approached Seagal, waving a hand dismissively. "I bet you can't even handle me in the first round," he taunted, his voice dripping with arrogance. A small crowd began to gather, sensing the tension. Cameras flashed, social media influencers recorded, and the whispers of spectators filled the air. Many knew who Seagal was, but they also knew that challenging a martial arts legend publicly was dangerous. Seagal, calm as ever, barely moved. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying the man in front of him. He didn't speak immediately, allowing the champion to enjoy the moment of arrogance. The UFC fighter puffed out his chest, clearly enjoying the attention. "Come on, old man, show me what you've got. Or are you too scared to step into the ring?" he said, laughing mockingly. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Some were skeptical of the UFC champion, others were excited to see a confrontation. But Seagal's presence had a different energy. It was quiet yet intense, and everyone felt the weight of his experience. Without raising his voice, Seagal finally spoke. "I don't need to prove anything to anyone," he said calmly. "But if you want to test yourself, we can start now." The challenge was accepted instantly. An area was cleared, a makeshift ring was prepared, and the tension in the air became almost tangible. People began placing bets, cameras recorded every angle, and the social media buzz reached a peak. The champion, still grinning, bounced lightly on his feet, confident that his striking power and agility would overwhelm Seagal quickly. The first bell rang, and the UFC champion moved aggressively, aiming to intimidate Seagal with rapid punches and kicks. But Seagal's reflexes were extraordinary. He didn't just block or dodge. His movements were precise, efficient, and calculated. Each step he took was measured, each shift of his body designed to exploit the opponent's overconfidence. The champion swung with all his might, but Seagal easily sidestepped, maintaining perfect balance and positioning. The crowd gasped. The UFC champion had never faced anyone with such mastery of distance, timing, and control. His attacks, though powerful, seemed almost clumsy against Seagal's smooth, deliberate movements. The legend's experience in Aikido and other martial arts allowed him to anticipate attacks, redirect energy, and maintain control without wasting unnecessary effort. The champion's frustration grew as his attacks continued to fail. He increased the intensity, throwing combinations faster, trying to land a decisive strike. But Seagal remained calm, deflecting punches with minimal movement, exploiting openings, and gradually destabilizing the champion. Each movement was like a lesson in martial arts, teaching the crowd what experience and technique could achieve over sheer strength and speed. Seagal's approach was patient. He wasn't reckless, nor was he trying to show off. He was simply in control. Every strike that came his way was met with precision counters, joint locks, or deflections that left the champion exposed. The UFC fighter began to realize that his arrogance had led him into unfamiliar territory. He had underestimated Seagal's skill, mistaking age for weakness, and now the situation was slipping out of his hands. In a sudden sequence, Seagal executed a series of moves that displayed his mastery. A subtle shift, a redirection of force, and the champion found himself off balance. Before he could recover, Seagal delivered a controlled strike that brought the fighter down to the mat. The arena erupted in shock. Some were cheering, others were in disbelief. No one had expected the UFC champion to be so quickly subdued. Seagal didn't stop. He maintained control, ensuring the champion was immobilized without causing serious injury. The lesson was clear. Arrogance and overconfidence could be more dangerous than any opponent's skill. Spectators could see the humiliation and realization on the champion's face. His pride was shattered in mere moments, and the reality of facing a true martial arts master had hit him like a lightning strike. As the crowd reacted, Seagal stood tall, calm, and composed. The UFC champion, breathing heavily and shaken, slowly realized the magnitude of his mistake. This was more than a fight. It was a demonstration of discipline, precision, and the timeless power of martial arts experience. Seagal finally helped the champion to his feet, demonstrating respect even in victory. Never underestimate the path of mastery, Seagal said softly, his eyes locking with the young fighter. Strength alone will not win battles that require control, patience, and knowledge. The champion, humbled and silent, nodded. He had learned a hard lesson, one that could not be taught in a gym or through fame. The spectators absorbed the scene, understanding that true martial arts went far beyond physical ability. This was about respect, skill, and the wisdom that came with years of dedication. The cameras captured every angle, every expression, and the moment was immortalized online. Within hours, the video would go viral, with headlines praising Seagal's technique, composure, and the humbling of a modern MMA star. Analysts discussed the fight for days, breaking down each move, each counter, and the psychological mastery displayed by Seagal. This encounter was more than just entertainment. It was a masterclass in martial arts philosophy. The UFC champion had entered the ring confident in his superiority, but left with a newfound respect for tradition, experience, and the unpredictable power of a seasoned expert. As the audience dispersed, Seagal remained composed, answering questions from reporters, demonstrating techniques, and sharing his insights. The UFC champion quietly left, reflecting on the lesson learned, his arrogance replaced with respect. The moral of this story is clear. Overconfidence can blind you to reality, and underestimating experience can lead to rapid consequences. Steven Seagal didn't just win the fight. He delivered a timeless lesson to anyone who believed that youth and fame could replace skill and mastery. The event became legendary, a story retold countless times by martial arts enthusiasts, sports analysts, and fans around the world. Videos, articles, and interviews highlighted how Seagal's approach was a mix of calm, control, and precision that modern fighters often overlook. And so, this is where part 1 concludes. The stage is set, the lesson has begun, and the UFC champion's journey from arrogance to humility has only just started. Stay tuned for part 2, where the story continues with reflections, consequences, and the final resolution of this unforgettable confrontation. As the dust settled from the unforgettable confrontation, the UFC champion sat alone in a quiet corner of the arena, replaying every moment in his mind. The humiliation, the shock, and the undeniable skill of Steven Seagal had left him speechless. But beyond embarrassment, a deeper realization began to emerge. This was more than a fight. It was a lesson in humility, discipline, and the value of true mastery. Meanwhile, Seagal moved calmly through the crowd, acknowledging fans, giving autographs, and answering questions with his trademark, quiet confidence. The aura around him was unmistakable. His presence commanded respect without a single raised voice. Everyone who witnessed the event understood that they had seen a master at work, someone whose skill had been honed over decades, far beyond the realm of flashiness or showmanship. Back in the quiet corner, the young UFC fighter reflected on how arrogance had clouded his judgment. Every move he had made had been fueled by ego, an overconfidence that his youth and recent victories could outmatch any seasoned fighter. But now, Faced with Seagal's calm precision, he realized the truth. Mastery was not about raw power or speed, but about understanding, timing, and mental composure. Later that evening, Seagal invited the young fighter to a private training area. The champion hesitated at first, still feeling the sting of defeat and public humiliation. Yet, curiosity and respect for the martial arts legend drew him forward. This was not just an opportunity to redeem himself. It was a chance to learn from one of the greatest. Seagal began with a simple lesson: control. Power without control is dangerous, he explained, demonstrating how a single misdirected punch could leave an opponent vulnerable. He showed the champion how to use leverage and angles, how to redirect energy, and how to anticipate attacks not just physically, but mentally. Each demonstration was slow and deliberate, allowing the young fighter to absorb every detail. The champion tried to replicate Seagal's moves, but his initial attempts were clumsy. He quickly realized how much he had taken for granted. His speed and strength alone were not enough. Seagal corrected his stance, adjusted his grip, and emphasized the importance of patience. Martial arts is not just about fighting, Seagal said. It is about discipline, respect, and knowing yourself as well as your opponent. As the training progressed, the young UFC fighter began to understand the deeper philosophy behind Seagal's actions. The earlier confrontation in the ring had not been about humiliation. It had been a demonstration of the principles that guided Seagal's life and martial arts career. It was a lesson in humility, showing that arrogance could be countered with skill, patience, and composure. Hours turned into days, and the champion's attitude began to shift. He no longer viewed Seagal as merely an opponent or a relic of the past. Instead, he saw him as a mentor, someone who could teach him lessons no gym, no training video, and no modern MMA bout could provide. Slowly, the champion's movements became more fluid, more precise, and more thoughtful. He learned to anticipate, to control, and to respect the power behind every technique. During one session, Seagal introduced advanced techniques, focusing on redirection and joint manipulation. A fight is won by those who remain calm under pressure, he explained, by those who think 2 steps ahead. Physical strength is temporary, skill and strategy are permanent. The champion absorbed every word, his ego slowly giving way to genuine admiration and a desire to improve. News of the initial confrontation had spread worldwide. Sports analysts dissected the fight. Fans debated the outcome, and social media exploded with discussions about technique, respect, and the clash of old school martial arts versus modern MMA. Yet, few understood the deeper narrative, that this was not just a battle of fists and kicks, but a profound lesson in martial arts philosophy and personal growth. The UFC champion, once boastful and overconfident, began to embrace humility. He reached out to Seagal, thanking him for the lesson, and acknowledging that his previous attitude had been misguided. Seagal, ever composed, simply nodded and said, "The true fight is always within yourself. Respect and discipline will carry you further than arrogance ever will." In the weeks that followed, the champion's performance in the ring changed noticeably. His opponents noticed a new level of patience and strategic thinking. Moves that once relied solely on brute force were now calculated, precise, and effective. He had learned the value of experience, the power of timing, and the importance of respecting every opponent, regardless of their age or background. Meanwhile, Seagal continued his quiet life, attending seminars, mentoring select students, and occasionally visiting public events. The confrontation had reminded the world that true martial arts mastery is timeless, and that legends like Seagal possess a depth of knowledge that modern fame alone cannot replicate. One day, the UFC champion approached Seagal with a renewed sense of purpose. "I see now," he said, "that I have much to learn. Thank you for teaching me the real meaning of martial arts." Seagal smiled slightly, placing a hand on the young fighter's shoulder. "Your journey has just begun. Remember, true mastery is not in defeating others, but in understanding yourself and growing from every experience. Reflecting on the encounter, the champion realized how narrowly he had avoided permanent embarrassment and how much he had underestimated his opponent. That moment in the ring had changed him, not just as a fighter, but as a person. It had taught him humility, patience, and the importance of continuous learning. The story of that day became legendary. Martial arts forums, sports channels, and YouTube videos shared the event repeatedly, not just for the thrilling spectacle, but for the deeper lessons it conveyed. Analysts praised Seagal's calm demeanor, his precise execution, and his ability to turn a moment of conflict into an educational experience. Fans celebrated the UFC champion's growth, recognizing that even the most arrogant individuals could change when confronted with true skill and wisdom. In private moments, Seagal reflected on the event as well. He understood that his role was not just to demonstrate power, but to impart understanding. The fight had been an opportunity to teach, to correct misconceptions, and to remind the world that mastery involves more than physical prowess. It requires patience, respect, and the continuous pursuit of knowledge. The young UFC fighter's journey did not end there. Inspired by Seagal, he devoted himself to rigorous training, studying traditional martial arts, and refining his techniques. His perspective on competition shifted from one of dominance to one of growth and learning. Every opponent became a teacher, every encounter an opportunity to practice discipline, patience, and strategy. Months later, the champion returned to the ring, but this time as a changed man. His fights demonstrated the blend of strength and wisdom he had gained. Analysts, fans, and fellow fighters noted the transformation, recognizing that humility and respect could coexist with power and skill. The encounter with Steven Seagal remained a pivotal moment in his career. It was no longer just a viral clip or a story of a fight. It had become a symbol of personal growth, a reminder that no matter how accomplished one is, there is always more to learn. The UFC champion's earlier arrogance had been replaced with respect, discipline, and an appreciation for the timeless knowledge that masters like Seagal possess. Even years later, the story would be retold in gyms, seminars, and martial arts schools around the world. Students would watch the video, study the techniques, and reflect on the lessons of humility, control, and strategic thinking. It was a story that transcended physical combat. It was about character, growth, and the journey toward true mastery. In conclusion, the arrogant challenge that began with a boastful UFC champion ended with far more than a fight. It concluded with a lesson that reshaped attitudes, perspectives, and approaches to martial arts. Steven Seagal had not only defended his legacy, but he had imparted wisdom that would influence a new generation of fighters. The champion, once blinded by overconfidence, had embraced the core principles of discipline, respect, and patience. Seagal had demonstrated that true strength lies not in arrogance, but in skill, composure, and understanding, and the world had witnessed a rare moment where pride met mastery, and humility emerged victorious. As the story fades into history, one truth remains: experience, respect, and discipline are timeless. The clash between the young UFC champion and Steven Seagal was more than a fight. It was a masterclass in humility, skill, and the profound lessons that martial arts can teach.